Well, hello everyone. It's about that time. This is your amazing new host, Dr. Mischele Watson, and I personally want to welcome you to my new podcast, Let's Just Talk About It, the premier place to keep up to date on some amazing topics and discussions that will encourage you to consider the phenomenal power of change. I hope you enjoy the show, so let's get straight into it. Well, hey y'all. Great evening. Welcome to this episode of Let's Just Talk About It. I'm your host, Dr. Mischele Watson, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Today's episode continues our efforts to talk about the power of change. I'm so excited. So, as I like to start my podcast with thankfulness to the amazing people who help make this podcast possible. Thank you to my production team and producer Kratos Media, and our intro and outro music by Dr. Ronnie Song of August Child Media Productions. And I want to welcome you as usual because we are pumped. We're absolutely, and you always know how I just like to talk about it. And tonight, we won't disappoint because we are setting the stage for what's to come. And this episode, again, is produced by Kratos Media and Appreciate Change Media Productions. Y'all ready? Absolutely. So I also wanted you to know that this podcast is designed to drive an enlightened conversation to address our roadblocks and understand and account for the barriers that often keep us with a mentality of all or nothing. So many of my guests are going to provide insights into how to change that will make a difference for a lifetime. There is something to love when we think of being changed beyond the challenge. So joining us today is none other than my great friend, Apostle Lynn Horton. We call her Preaching Lynn. And we hope that we will get through this episode without cutting up and laughing as we really do in real life, because we be laughing. But I'm going to try to do my best because I know she has something amazing to share today. She is a retired military Army veteran, the senior pastor of the People's Hope Church in Temple Hills, Maryland, and also the CEO of Lend a Hand LLC. She is on a mission to empower people who have been under the grips and intrusive thoughts and voices of sexual trauma. Tonight, we're going to do just that. We're just going to talk about the power of change to lend a hand through some amazing dialogue and conversation. Why don't you join me and welcome Apostle Lynette to our episode today?
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Always an honor. Always an honor. Always a pleasure. Welcome to this episode.
No, you're good.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so glad to have you. It's been a minute. You were one of the first people I thought of when I decided to do my podcast, and I think of all the amazing guests that I wanted to join. And of course, you were at the top of the list. You were at the top of the list for two reasons, and you know me, I like to be transparent. You're on the top of the list for one is because you have something important to say. And the second reason that you were on the top of my list is that you're just crazy. You're just crazy. You just all that in a bag of chips, as I might say. And when you want to have special guests on your program, you want to make sure that they're people that will grab other people's attention. And I know that you're going to do just that. So we're going to have a great conversation today. Well, Apostle Lynn, we talk about your organization, Lend a Hand.
Yeah.
And it has been something that you have had on your heart for many, many years. It is not something that just kind of came up by osmosis, right? It's something that was birthed because of experiences or lived experiences that you even went through yourself, right? So, why don't we tell my audience a little bit tonight about Lend a Hand and how you think that this organization in the DMV area can, be a blessing to other people and help to change the trajectory of their lives?
Absolutely. Dr. Kim, let me tell you, one of the worst issues that people run into, and this is just my personal opinion, is having an issue that you're too afraid to talk about. It doesn't matter what the issue is, but when it comes to sexual trauma, probably more than not, the first issue is going to be shame and guilt.
Right.
Blame. And then it doesn't matter if it's women who've had the trauma or men who've had the trauma, because I'm open to either.
Right.
But where the problem comes is that people get into the level of embarrassment and shame that will encapsulate the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when the mind gets stuck, nothing moves forward.
Wow.
And so as I served some time in the military, and there were some specific things that I encountered, and I had a sexual trauma, and as a result, my choice was at the time commit suicide.
Wow. Wow.
And I mean, I had been preaching all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I started preaching when I was 14 years old. All I ever knew was hallelujah, and then this thing came upon me. Mm-hmm. And so when it came upon me one night in church, mm-hmm. and I blamed God. Hey, and which is one of the things that we do. Right. We get angry with God and say, you shouldn't have done this. You should not have done this to me. You had a responsibility to take care of me and protect. Mm-hmm. And so no one could take care of me. Mm-hmm. I was so devastated, and so I began to cut. Mm. And I don't mind showing, because God erased all my scars. Mm. There were so few parts of my body that I wasn't cutting it. And for those people who believe that African Americans do not have self-mutilation, please get your head out of the sand. Mm. It happens. True. And so I began to cut. And then what was the actual turnaround for me is I had taken my 9mm and put it in my mouth. Mm-hmm. And I told God, this is your last chance. You need to show up, because all of this that I've given, I'm real tired of this. And Dr. Kim, my son at the time was just turning 2 years old, and he stumbled in the room. And when he stumbled, he reached up for me, and I had to put the gun down and pick him up. Wow. And I knew that at that point, I knew that my life was going to have to be about making sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else. Change. Absolutely. You had to make some decisions, some right now, at the very moment decisions. And I don't believe it was by coincidence or by chance that your son would come into the room at that very moment. That God would allow him to come into the room to create change in your own life, given the circumstances that you were faced with at that time, which were probably very detrimental, because someone putting a 9mm in their mouth, they're at the lowest low in their lives, and they're forgetting the people in their lives that really do mean the most to them. So tell me a little bit about that, and when your son came into the room and you felt, what did you feel at that moment? Well, I was praying. I was cussing. I was praying. I was crying, because I was real transparent with God, because this your last time. Mm-hmm. And I was telling God, you need to show up right now, or this is it. And he did. And he did. Hallelujah. That's one. Mm-hmm. He did. But then it was time. It took time for me to build my trust. We say, I put my hope in God. I put my trust. I build my hopes on things eternal. Well, I wasn't there anymore. Mm-hmm. I couldn't take a hug. Nobody could come near me. I blocked everybody from my home. It cost me my career. Mm-hmm. But oh, hallelujah! I went to rape crisis, but rape crisis couldn't help me. I needed a reason to live, and I needed to be introduced to a possibility that my life could be different. And it was.
And it was.
And it was.
So you took a moment to imagine the possibility.
I had no choice.
Of something that needed, you had to, it was essential, it was critical.
It was critical.
That the change that you needed had to happen at that moment.
And Dr. Kim, I was married at the time. And my former husband said something that changed my whole life. And he said, well, I started to take your gun, but I figured it'd be easier for you to kill yourself here in the house than to accidentally go out and kill somebody else. And that's when I realized that I had a reason, a right, and a responsibility to live. It took a while. It did.
It took a minute.
Yeah, but I did.
But you did. And here you are today.
Hallelujah.
You are a senior pastor. You are a community advocate. You are a CEO. You're a public speaker. You're an educator. The list goes on. You're a comedian. A little something. She got a little something for us. You're all that as a result of this sexual trauma that infiltrated your life beyond what you could imagine at that time. So something that you shared just a few minutes ago that really also struck a chord in me was, since we're talking about sexual traumas, that sometimes our minds are in a box where we only think that sexual trauma only affects one gender.
Wrong.
Right? We get comfortable thinking sexual traumas only impact the female gender. But that's not the case. It's not true.
It is not true.
And it also affects men
in
many ways. And talk to me a little bit about that and how in your experience and through Linda Hand, where it isn't just necessarily women that are only impacted by sexual traumas, but how men are also impacted in many different ways.
Well, let me tell you that one of the greatest impact moments that came upon me was a conversation with a gentleman who had been sexually traumatized in Vietnam.
Wow. And
he told the story, and Dr. Kim, this changed my life. He told the story as if it happened yesterday. Vietnam, of course, we knew it ended in the 70s, and he cried about it like a person who had not been healed, and he described these men who harmed him. So it's not just women who are sexually traumatized, but let's also keep in mind that there are female to female sexual trauma.
Right, absolutely.
There are male to male sexual trauma.
Yes.
There are also female to male sexual trauma.
Yes.
And every kind of combination and what happens, the shame and the guilt comes often based on what kind of trauma.
Right.
Because there are those who try and remind you this is what you wanted. Isn't this what you want? And of course this is, and to try and explain it made it even more difficult. So then you hide it, and you hide the pain, and the pain gets greater. But incidentally, Dr. Kim, I ended up having a heart attack.
Wow.
Myocardial infarction of the right ventricle. I will never forget the moment I learned, and I realized at that moment that my heart had attacked me. I was going on an attack against the spirit that causes people to lose themselves after sexual trauma. I'm on a mission. And so Linda Hand is actually open to every person, every situation, transgender. I have people who are transgender who speak to me on a regular basis. Yes. I'm so delighted. I just send a message of love and hope. Love and hope. I don't care what the situation was. I promise you, if you give me some time, we're going to get you to love. We're going to get you to hope. And we're going to get you to dreaming again.
Dreaming again.
That's got
it. Wow. You know, just thinking about having the capacity to dream bigger than yourself, right? Beyond things that you can imagine within your own thinking, your own capacity, what you're able to hold. And so having the ability to learn how to dream again can speak volumes, right? Because often I find, just in dealing with many of my clients, is that people are at a point in their lives where they just want to give up. They're at a point in their lives where they don't think there's any possibility of changing the circumstances in which they find themselves in. But I'm here, and I appreciate how God has placed people in my life to remind them of all the imaginable possibilities that God has for you through the power of change. And so when I think of that and lend a hand, um, it was, tell me a little bit of how you came across this amazing name for your organization.
Well, one of the things that I like as the senior pastor, as the apostle, I only am called by my first name, Lynn.
Lynn.
Well, Lynette is my first name, but Lynn. And so I wanted to be the one that was lending a hand. And so it's lend a hand. And I want to be the one that's offered up to share your story with, to share your story to let's get into the intricacy of the details so that we can plug them up. Because some people can, in a blanket, say, okay, it's forgiven. Not always true, but they can start. And then there are those who have to take little bits and pieces, and I want to deal with that part. And some of my coaching clients, they talk very detailed about it because Lynn wants to lend a hand, and I want to support you. But Dr. Kim, incidentally, there was a song. I think it was the Red Bud Gospel Singers.
They're taking us back now.
And every day when I got off work, retreat. that played every day at 4:15. By 4:30, this song came on every single day. And the song was, bring back the joy I once knew, restore the faith that I had in you, and I will forever be true. And that was the promise I gave. Ooh. If you bring back my joy. I didn't know how to ask for it, but the Red Bud Gospel Singers
it spoke to what you needed in your heart, that you could actually sing it forth in your voice and put it out there to what you needed God to do in your life as He lended you a hand to know that all things are possible in Him.
It was possible, and it is continued to be possible, and I'm still evolving. There was a time that I was better, but I couldn't talk about it.
Right.
There was a time that I wanted, and I'm open now, but there was times I was on my way to preach at a church, at a service one night, and I couldn't find the church. And just as I was getting ready to leave, you may remember the young lady at my affirmation, and I said, she saved my life when I was in the military. She was with me. And God blessed her to save my life, really. She says I saved hers, but she saved mine. But I was just getting ready to leave, and I said, I don't want to let these people down, but I can't find this church. And just as I was getting ready to pull off, I saw the church. And I wished a million times I would have never, ever gone in there. I wish I would have never seen this place, because what happens in sexual trauma, it doesn't always happen a rape. It's progressive.
It's progressive.
And the war was going on. My son's daycare center had been firebombed. The marriage was in trouble, and the person that sexually traumatized me was a female who I, for some reason, thought that I needed to take care of my son. And so she's taking care of him to keep him out of the daycare that had been firebombed. But ain't nothing free. Free ain't free. Nothing but God. And it was a horrible experience for me. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm going to grab your hand and pull you up out of it. Anybody who wants to be free.
I want you to say that in the camera.
If you want to be free, if you will reach out and touch my hand, I promise you, I will pull you out of here. If we got to sing through it, we got to pray through it, we got to preach through it, if we got to cry through it, if we got to put on Boogie Nights and dance to it. That's one of my favorite songs. But whatever has to happen, whatever it happens to look like, I want you to understand that there is someone who wants the best for you. And we are working towards bringing forward whatever needs to happen to grab your hand and pull you forward. And that is my promise. And that is where Lend a Hand LLC came from. Mm-hmm. Dr. Kim, you had the vision with me, and I honor you because I couldn't even put the words together. And, but let me tell you something. I ended up, but this is what the Holy Spirit did. He gave me a full scholarship with the University of Maryland to create the website, to create the logo, to create, and it's absolutely free because of Veteran Services. And they said, we believe in this mission to heal the world from sexual trauma. Wow. And I'm gonna go around the world doing it. And I've actually put in a contract. I'm in the process of a contract to go into the basic trainings.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Because we want to we want to hit it off before it happens. It's going to happen. It may not be you, but someone's going, but we want to head it off.
We want to head it off. Yeah. And I appreciate and respect so much the work that Lend a Hand is doing and the lives that is changing, the voices that will be able to speak up in the midst of trauma, right? Because trauma is a devastating thing. And it impacts so many of us in different ways. And no two traumas may be alike, right? The name of the trauma may be alike, right? But not the experience of the trauma is the same. And so I'm always mindful of the fact that when I talk about trauma, that I don't put it in a certain box, my own box, right? Because again, it's not the same. The experience is not the same. So when we think of it in that context, and we know that rape, we know the word rape, and we know the word sexual trauma, and we know, the various names that are associated with sexual traumas, but we don't always know how the person will be affected by it. What are some of the things that you would tell someone to encourage them to use their voice, to share, to grab hold to someone that will listen and help them to find their way out? Talk about it.
You must talk about it. You must tell someone. Reach out to me. Reach out preachandlynn@gmail.com. Reach out to me. But you must talk about it. You must be willing to be transparent. You must be willing to trust that something really can stop the pain. And one of the things, Dr. Kim, people don't talk about are the intrusive thoughts.
Right.
So you could be, and what was happening to me, I'm sitting and watching television, and then all of a sudden, a thought goes by. Now, to the naked eye, it's only been a millisecond. But to me, it was 30 minutes worth of drama and trauma. And I was trying to explain it to my doctor. I was trying to explain. And once I walked into a psychiatrist's office one day. And this psychiatrist said to me, she said, in the intrusion, are the children there? And I immediately looked for the door. She said, I'll let you go in a moment. And I knew then she had tapped into something. She said, because it was the little girl who got hurt. The little girl who, and so there are so many different dynamics when trauma comes. So you may, I was 22 when this happened to me. But there was a 7-year-old.
Right.
And a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. And now I have granddaughters that I keep covering. So I know that if anyone would trust the opportunity to get real exposed, and if you can't talk about it, write it out. get some crayons and color it out.
Mm-hmm.
Get a megaphone and scream it out.
Right.
But get it out.
But get it out. So this speaks directly to us. Let's just talk about it, right?
Absolutely.
Let's just talk about it, because nothing can be changed if we don't talk about it. Nothing can be resolved if we don't talk about it. It is the greatest form of understanding and communicating when we are faced with so many different experiences and tragedies that impact our lives, that we're afraid to sometimes share. But talking about it, that's why, it's the number one thing you're going to do if you have a therapist, if you have a psychologist, if you have a psychiatrist, whatever it is, you're going to start with simply talking about it. And if you are like Apostle Lynn has just described, when you talk about it, it actually takes you back to the beginning.
It does.
The beginning of many things happening in your life as a child, right? And that experience just continues to touch different points in your life that you find that the trauma has impacted.
And before some people can talk, if we can introduce a tear, sometimes what locks it in, what a person proving to themselves that they're not lost, they won't cry. I'm in charge of something. But that is where this heart thing came from for me. I held it in for 5 years. I wouldn't let a tear fall. I would tell myself,
Don't you cry.
You better
Don't you cry.
And it only made me sick. So I do. If even if my clients can't speak, I'll touch them on EFT spots. I'll because I had to study several different modalities. I mean, I walked at a place one day and I was the only one that was like me. But I learned some of the greatest techniques of healing, and I promise you, I will tap into each one or either one to bring someone forward.
Wow, this is so important, because they are the toughest conversations that people will have because of a spirit of fear. The Word of God says that He hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but of love and of power and a sound mind. But it is the fear. Sometimes we got to tell fear, you don't live here no more. you don't live here. You don't take up residence in my life anymore, right? And you've got to speak that with authority and with the power of your voice that will say, no, no more. No longer will I allow fear to take over any part of my mind, my thinking, my body, my soul, my spirit, that won't allow me to be healed. What would you say to that in the spirit of fear?
Fear is paralyzing. You have to face it. I'll tell you, my mother said to me, and you had the privilege of knowing my mother before she took her journey home, but she said to me,
oh, she loved me.
Yes,
she loved Dr. King,
yes,
Dr. Watson.
She would say, you pretty.
She did.
You are pretty. She loved you. And so she said to me, never live in your own house afraid. Never. She said, if something you hear and it goes buck, go find out, because you surprise it before it surprises you. And she gave me the foundation of facing a thing. And I remember years ago, I heard what sounded like someone opening my sliding door when I was asleep. And I was like 100 months pregnant. That's how I felt. And I could hear Josephine saying, don't ever sit in your own house afraid. And see, the difference was the house out there was what she was talking about. But what I heard is I'm sitting in this house afraid. And I got up to go and look and see. And I was pretty close. Because I was, only thing I knew to speak in tongues, I was afraid, but I was not going to let it take me down. When we had a tornado coming through the neighborhood, I had a fallout shelter. I still have a fallout shelter. I'm not going to be afraid of my house. And so when it came to this thing, once I got on top of it, I not only decided that I was not going to be afraid, but no one who came to me was going to have to be afraid.
Wow, that is such an amazing story of truth, right? An amazing story of resilience, of determination, of purpose. Not to be afraid in those times when you feel that you think you can only be afraid, but there's options.
Yeah.
There are options. And I'm so appreciative of this conversation that we get to simply talk about
Just
it.
talk about
You know, I have to share this quick story of one year, maybe 2 years ago. Um, Apostle Lynn and another friend of ours wanted to take me someplace amazing to celebrate my birthday. And who would think that, women of our age would come up with anything that's just out there? Well, I'm here to tell you, in every part of it, Apostle Lynn comes up and saying, we are going paintballing. We're going to do paintballing. And so they take me out here in Maryland to this paintballing. We're all suited up. We're all ready. We're good to go. And myself and Apostle Lynn and another good friend of ours, we are ready to go. We're like, we've got our paint gun. We're all out there. And so we go out into this big field and we're ready to kind of shoot and do our little thing. And the other person and I, we're just out there. We're like, okay, yeah, this is how we do it. And all of a sudden we're getting shot at. We're like, oh, what was that?
And they hurt.
And they hurt, right. She is a army sharpshooter. She had found herself up on I don't know, a fortress somewhere, and she was getting us in every place that you can imagine. And we could not figure out where this sharpshooter was coming from. But it was the most hilarious time that we could have shared together and just enjoying life. This is the beauty of imagining the possibilities. This is the beauty of experiencing things with people in your lives that can help bring about change. My mantle, my motto, real change begins with you first. And so when we think about the power of change and lending a hand, and when we think about the power of change and being a voice of reason, a voice of hope, a voice of restoration, a voice of power, it speaks volumes to me. So right before we close, I want to take a few minutes for you to just share, how Linda Hand is all about making a difference.
It's definitely about making a difference. And Dr. Kim, I want to piggyback on you talking about us going to the firing range, because that's exactly how I'm attacking this spirit that's coming after the people, the women, the men, the everybody.
All.
So I am a marksman, not a sharpshooter, but a marksman. And my father was a state trooper, so he taught me how to shoot. And that's how I address this. I'm going to suit up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pull out my magazine, my M16, and I'm gonna lean into it, because that's you can't really shoot until you can lean into it. You got to put the butt of the gun right here and bring your hip over, and I'm gonna cock up, and I'm coming for it.
You're coming for it.
I'm coming for it. I'm going to show you how valuable and how important you are, that I will shoot. And I don't miss. Do I miss?
Oh, she wasn't missing. We had the bruises to prove it. She wasn't missing not one shot against us, right? But I am so grateful that you are joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took the time. I don't take anything about our relationship for granted. We are amazingly lifelong friends. She's also my dance partner. Every time we get together, we got to do a little jig, with a little something, right? And so just thinking about all of the opportunities we have to be great in God, to be great in the things that He has destined for us in our lives through purpose, right? Is such an amazing things. And so, y'all, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Let's Just Talk About It. I am just overwhelmed and excited that Pastor or Apostle Lynette Lynn Horton has joined us today, and she hopefully has shared some valuable information with you that'll help you to realize that you have someone that is able to make a difference in your life. And listen, preachinglynn@gmail.com. Well, that's all we have for you tonight on this episode. And we look forward to you joining us again next Sunday, same time, same place. Thanks again.
It's been a pleasure. It really